palaki kasi I think we'll have problem with the Google Classroom if I do that. If you have questions, kindly unmute na lang ha kasi since I am screen sharing, I cannot see your chats immediately unless I go back to the window para sa Google Meet. So, ganun na lang yung gawin natin. Ayan. So, sige. So today, we will be discussing the research topic or the research problem, including the other areas or sections under the introduction of the thesis. So every thesis writing class starts with, syempre, identification of the problem. Now, since most of you are almost done, except for those na first year pa lang, no? But again, yung most of you almost done na with the ACAD, so you will be writing your own thesis na. I hope nag-start na kayo ng think of the research topic or research problem that you would like to pursue sa MS ninyo. So in identifying problems class, there are factors that we need to consider kung paano natin maa-assess na researchable ba yung topic ninyo or hindi. So, syempre, if ngayon nag-iisip kayo ng ano bang topic ang gusto kong gawin, one factor that you need to consider is that the problem itself is existing in the locality or even in our country as a whole, but take note, no solution is existing pa. So, walang available na solution. Yan yung pinakaunang factor na i-consider natin if we are thinking about the problem that we will pursue, okay, in the MS na thesis. Or, if the solution is already there, meron ng mga possible or existing na mga solutions, you have to also consider if the solution can be answered using statistical methods and techniques. So we are talking here about quantitative research. Although you are permitted to do a qualitative research, sa quantitative research kasi, ito yung mostly nag-e-exist sa atin, especially sa MSPharm or even sa MATC, most of the time, we are into doing quantitative research. So, a little differentiation lang, pag sinabing quantitative research, this is where we do hypothesis testing. There is data here na numerical. So just like when you are doing an experiment and then you'll get a numerical data, that will be under the quantitative research. Or some other descriptive research are also under quantitative class. Na like if you do surveys and you use questionnaires using Likert scale, under pa rin yan siya sa quanti. So kung ganun yung topic or problem na naiisip nyo, you have to consider also if the solution can be quantified and can be analyzed using statistical tool or methods. So that's number 2. And then sa qualitative naman, ituloy ko na lang yung qualitative. If you are going to make a qualitative research, there is no hypothesis testing here. And definitely, this is data-free. We don't have numerical data. And our data will be coming from the answers of our participants when we conduct interview with them. So, purely words, medyo mahirap lang when it comes to the transcribing and giving meaning to the answers of our participants. So personally, I am actually a quanti researcher. So nagkakandak ako ng mga research pero I'm more on quanti. So I do experimental researches. I have done descriptive research also, and I have done also a mixed method na research. So pag sinabing mixed method na research, I have done a research na pinagsabay ang dalawa, quanti and qualitative na type. So I have numerical data and I also conducted interview sa aking mga participants. Okay? So, pero personally, I would like to pursue more on the quanti research na side. So that's the second factor, the second factor kung pwede bang gamitan ng statistical methods and techniques itong solution na gusto nating gawin for the certain problem at hand. Okay? And then number 3, there are probable solutions but they are not yet tested. So if may naisip kayo dyan na problem and then nakita niyo based on your research na meron ng mga possible na solutions for that na nag-e-exist. But since hindi pa sila natitest, magiging siya ngayon, area for research siya. So you can pursue that also. And then, the occurrence of phenomena requires scientific investigation to arrive at precise solution. So, if nahihirapan pa rin kayong maghanap ng research problem niyo, you look at the current situation. If merong mga sudden occurrence of an issue or a concern that we really need to address, especially sa ating field, sa pharma or even sa chemistry. And there are a lot serious na mga problems or issues na nag-e-exist ngayon na kailangan talaga, nagde-demand talaga ng research. So, ang tandaan nyo lang, kapag nasa time na kayo, nag-iisip kayo ng problem ninyo, the problem should always be SMART. So, I believe we are very much familiar with SMART, diba? Specific dapat yung problem natin. And then measurable. Kailangan meron tayong mga scientific protocols and procedures na pwede gamitin just to gather our data and address that certain problem. And then, syempre, A is achievable. Aside from the scientific procedures or protocols na pwede natin gamitin, do not forget na kailangan din there are statistical methods or techniques na applicable for us to analyze our data. Kasi those numbers will become meaningless unless we analyze them, we process them using statistical techniques or methods. And syempre, R is realistic. The real results are attained because they are gathered scientifically and not manipulated. So, especially if the time comes that you will be asked or tasked to do an experimental research class, we need to be honest with the results of our experiment. And dapat walang manipulation na nangyayari dyan. And syempre, time-bound kasi naghahabol tayo ng oras and then we need to graduate, right? Kasi, di ba, I think nag-share ako last time, it took me 5 years to finish my master's, my MS. So I had 2 years for the academics and it took me 3 years to finish my research. So supposedly I can finish that in a year, but my problem was I was so lazy to do my research that time. And aside from the time wasted, it also wasted money kasi di man ko enroll. So, kana inyuhang isipon, class, kapag ka nagapili mo og inyuhang research problem. So, karon, just a little review. I hope naga-move ang screen. Tell me kung wala naga-move ang akong PowerPoint, ha? So we have here the components of the first part of the research na inyuhang buhaton. Syempre, you have there the introduction, the statement of the problem, the hypothesis, and assumption. We also have significance of the study. And then we have theoretical and or conceptual framework, especially for quantitative research. If you would like to pursue a quantitative research, you need to have the theoretical and the conceptual framework. Kasi itong part na ito, pwede kasi siyang wala sa quali. Again, pwede siyang wala sa quali kapag theoretical and conceptual framework. But yes, both of them have scope and delimitation of the study. And lastly, we have the RRL. So I've mentioned that last time also na in the IMRAD format, IMRAD is Introduction, Methodology, Results, and Discussion. We don't have the chapter 2 na solely for the review of related literatures only. Pero instead, this part is already incorporated in the introduction. So, if you're going to make your introduction, syempre this is where you introduce your research problem or your research topic. You need to inform your reader about the general subject area na ginagawan mo ng research. So you should be explaining ano yung alam mo sa topic na yan and what are we uncertain about. So ano yung existing na mga information about the research problem and ano yung missing and ano yung gusto mong makuha sa research mo. Kailangan ma-establish natin yan sa introduction. So, sa introduction naman, everything you write here must relate to your research question. So, later I'll be I'll let you watch a video about how to select a research problem and at the same time how to make a research question. But before that, let's just finish the part of the introduction. Sa introduction naman, we present the problem either using an assertion beginning, a quotation beginning, or a question beginning. We don't really directly use a dictionary introduction. When I say dictionary introduction, syempre, like for example, our topic is about diabetes and we will directly in the introduction state the meaning, the dictionary meaning sa diabetes. It's either we assert something like we assert that diabetes is a major problem nowadays globally, not just in the Philippines. So that's an assertion beginning. And from there, you expound the idea of diabetes. And then, aside from that, there are studies na nagagamit sila ng quotation beginning. I mean, sa first sentence talaga ng kanilang introduction. But I seldom see that nowadays since I deal most of the time sa kanang research since I hold the research department sa school namin. Most of the time I see assertion beginning talaga. But there are also again question beginning like the author starts with a specific question and then after that expound the problem sa mga succeeding paragraphs. Pero again, assertion beginning ang pinakamarami. Now, do not forget when you are going to make your introduction sa thesis, you will start with the topic. Syempre, you have to define and elaborate the subject matter of your research using the paragraph development na methods like giving examples, giving statistics especially kasi you have to really establish the situation sa problem mo. Pwedeng situation globally, situation in the whole Philippines, or situation there sa Davao, or here sa Jensen, or kung saan man kayo ngayon, kung saan ang local ng inyong study. And at the same time, you have to discuss also the importance of your topic. So you have to really establish the significance of your research and how does it help the community or what benefit can we get or derive from your research. And then aside from that, you also have to state the reasons why you are choosing the topic. What motivated you to conduct the study or to look for solution for that certain problem. So again, mostly ang ginagawa nila dito, statistics ito. Kasi nakita natin na ito nakarami yung may diabetes nowadays, kaya I want to pursue this topic. So ganun yung ginagawa mostly ng mga researchers. And lastly, all introduction ends with the purpose of the study. So you really have to state the objectives. So do you have questions about the introduction? Or dili pa ninyo siya
Ako,
ma-picture
ma'am.
out? Yes, Christine?
Ay, ma'am, kasi meron kami inattendan na parang symposium last time about research. Tapos, ang sabi sa amin is, in the introduction daw po, it's better to parang put statistical data to prove
Yeah.
yung parang ano natin, yung problem natin. So, for both quali din yan siya and quanti, ma'am? Or quanti lang siya?
Most of the time, it will be sa quanti. Sa quanti, we will really state statistics just to establish the urgency of the problem. Mao gina siya ang reason why we play statistics. We need to establish the urgency sa pagkandak ng study for that certain problem. But for quali kasi, since this is just an inquiry or most of the time exploration of experiences, ganun kasi mostly ang topic ng quali, di ba? Nag-e-explore tayo ng experiences of our participants sa isang situation or phenomenon. So most of the time, actually, we cannot quantify experience. So reading a lot of qualitative research, I don't see a lot of statistics. Ano lang sila, sa introduction, ang ginagawa lang nila is they introduce the research topic and then nagbibigay lang sila ng parang current situation. Example, situation sa, what do you call that? Situation sa Philippines. Tapos kung makahanap sila ng related literatures of or studies sa situation sa example sa Davao, yun lang sinestate lang nila no, yun, pero mostly walang statistics na involved sa sa qualitative research. Actually, I can let you see, but this one is a draft kasi. Wait lang ha, let me check. I have this example here. Wait lang, let me open. Asa gaya na ko ito gibutang. Kasi we know that sa quantitative na research, meron tayong mga statistics, no? Parehas sa master's na ako na study, I studied about anti-angiogenic activity of two plants. So sa introduction, syempre, inintroduce ko what anti-angiogenic is, or I actually started with angiogenesis and then I presented my plant and then I relate angiogenesis to what do you call that? Cancer. And then yun na, doon na ako naglagay ng statistics sa cancer na part. Kasi quanti yung research ko sa MS. Pero itong ipapakita ko sa inyo, though this is not purely quali because hindi pa talaga ako nakagawa ng quali class na pure lang talaga na quali. This one is a mixed method. So, asa na to dapit? Ano ni siya, mixed method ni siya, pero ang introduction ko kasi does not contain statistical information. Wait lang, sino makita? Makita ninyo?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This was actually my study about the development of a pharmacology manual because I want to develop a manual for PCOL na research-based. So nagkandak ako nito ng research and paano ko nilagay yung aking introduction. This one is actually an assertion beginning. And then afterwards, I don't really have statistical information here. I just discussed the current situation in the Philippines sa practice sa pharmacy, especially sa pharmacology. So yun lang ang ginawa ko. So mostly Philippines ito kasi my manual is intended to be used here in the Philippines. So this is just more than 2 na pages. So wala kayong makikita here na statistical information. Wala din kasi akong makita dyan, for example, sa PCOL, wala naman akong malagay na statistics just to establish my subject matter. So, ito lang ang ginawa ko. Nagbigay lang ako ng current situation ng pagtuturo and study of pharmacology in the Philippines. So, yun yung gawin nyo if ever you are going to pursue a qualitative na study. Sa quanti, you will be really asked to provide statistical data para ma-establish lang talaga ang problem niyo. Anything else that you would like to ask? Sino na dito yung really into research na hindi lang undergrad yung nagawa na research? Meron ba? Yung talagang gumagawa ng research class. Are you into it? Or luod kaayo ang research? Kay murag katong undergrad ta, murag di ka po ita magbuhat sa ato ang research, no? Naabay into research din, he? Wala? Wala. Sige, so wala, no? Currently, human naman ako tong, study na ako sa development of pharmacology manual, but the manual is not yet done until now. I still don't have time for that. Currently, I'm also doing another study. Mostly yung mga study na kinakandak ko is to be applied sa academe. So, meron akong study ngayon about an intervention plan for students to help them in their academic performance. So, like I'm designing a program para sa students. So, yun naman yung ginagawa ko ngayon. Pero that one is a descriptive na study. Pero in my introduction, did I place there? Wala din ata akong statistical na data there. I just describe also the current situation sa study of pharmacy in the Philippines, and at the same time sinali ko na yung current situation sa school kasi that is where dun yung intention ko to apply the program. So yun lang yung paggawa ng introduction naman. Ang kailangan lang talaga natin gawin, ma-establish natin ang urgency, why are we going to conduct the study, and ma-clarify lahat about the problem. So, ma-inform natin ang reader natin about the problem at hand and what are we going to do. And then the next part will be the statement of the problem. Syempre sa statement of the problem, you can state this either in a question form. Most of the time we use the question form, right? But there are researchers na ang ginagawa nila is in declarative form. Pero sa school, sa UIC, ever since naka-question form kasi yung statement of the problem natin, all we need to take note sa paggawa ng SOP is we will start with the general problem first. Again, we will start with the general problem, and then after that, i-break down natin siya into sub-problems or sub-questions. So we'll make it specific. I-specify natin siya. So, ang mga questions naman na ilalagay natin sa statement of the problem is i-arrange natin in order of the researcher's research design. So, ano yung research design natin? Quantitative descriptive ba? Or quantitative experimental? Or pwede ding qualitative? So, depende yung sa qualitative, actually, we only have one grand tour question. Isang question lang yung mostly makikita natin sa quali, ha. If you really want to pursue doing a qualitative research, isang question lang siya dyan. Ang tawag natin doon, grand tour question. And since most of the time we explore experiences, so yun yung magiging question natin. What are the experiences? Example, ang gusto mong i-conduct na study is about the experiences of the hospital pharmacist working during the pandemic. So qualitative research yan siya class kasi wala naman tayong numerical value for experience. So yung question mo lang dito sa statement of the problem, magiging purpose siya na ang pagka-state, what are the experiences of the hospital pharmacist working in their hospitals, no, respective hospitals during the pandemic. So yun lang yung magiging question. Pero pag sa quantitative research kasi, kailangan talaga natin siyang isa-isahin. So i-subdivide natin yung ating general problem and i-specify natin. Pero ang tandaan nyo, huwag kayo maglalagay ng question sa statement of the problem na hindi mo masasagot sa result. Everything should be answered in the results section. Na kung ang inyong gagawin na research is about quantitative descriptive research, most of the time it starts with the question about the demographic profile of our respondents. Okay? So, the demographic profile, age, gender, civil status, pero it's actually the decision of the researcher kung anong demographic profile ang i-include niya sa kanyang SOP. Kasi hindi naman necessary na lahat talaga about sa respondents yung profile nila ilagay natin. Depende yan siya sa sa kailangan ng study ninyo. You have to assess kung ano ba yung kailangan natin i-establish, ang gender, ang age, or ang educational attainment. So again, it's the decision of the researcher. And then aside from the demographic profile, syempre, we will be including questions that are necessary for us to answer the objective or the purpose of our study. So mga questions encountered by our respondents in terms sa physical, social, psychological, or professional, depende sa kailangan din ng study ninyo. And other questions which may have close bearing with the study on hand. So, i-ano nato na siya, i-divide. So, katong study nga akong ipakita kagain na study na ako about sa ganito, wait lang. Sa development of the pharmacology manual. So, paano na ko gihimo akong statement of the problem? I have this here. I hope you can see it. Siyempre, I started, wait lang, naglibog na ko. Ayan, I started with the general problem. Siyempre, my aim is to develop an instructional material sa pag-teach ng pharmacology. And in order for me to develop this instructional material, gihati-hati na ko ang problem. So ito na, I have lots of questions here like what is the status of teaching pharmacology in terms of the following? Kasi I need this one. I need to establish this one para makagawa ako ng instructional material. And then, I need to establish also, aside from the status, I need also to know the performance level of the students. So actually nagkuha pa ko sa school, nagkuha pa ko academic grades ng mga students, not just their grades, their scores sa different topics. Kasi I need to know also the topics na mahina sila or mataas yung scores nila para maka-decide ako ano yung lalagay ko sa instructional material. So that's how I divide my general problem. My general problem is this one, and then these are the divisions. And since this one is a mixed method, I also have questions like, what are the significant experiences ng mga students and mga teachers? And lastly, ang kailangan ko talagang sagutin, based from the data na nag-gather ko from 1 to 4, paano ako makaka-develop ng pharmacology manual. So I don't have question about inferential statistics here, like is there a significant relationship or is there a significant difference, because I don't need that in my study. So as researcher, ikaw yung may alam kung ano yung gagawin mo sa study mo and ano yung kailangan mo. So ako, again, hindi ko kailangan ng question na relationship or difference kasi all I need to do is to produce a manual. Pero kung ang study ninyo ay kailangan ng inferential statistics, you really have to have questions like, this one. So questions which may determine the significant relationships of the variables, factors, or constructs with those of the problem. So kagaya ng study na experimental, like kung gusto niyong gumawa ng anti-diabetic agent, syempre sa last part, you will be asking, is there a significant difference in the blood glucose level of the animal na ginamit ninyo sa treated with, syempre yung plant material ninyo, tas number 2, yung positive control, and then number 3, if you have the control or the negative control. Dapat alam natin yung difference. So yan yung time na kailangan natin ng inferential statistics. That's for the experimental na part. Kasi para magkaroon ka ng conclusion na yes, this plant is really a potential na anti-diabetic drug, kailangan i-compare natin siya sa existing na drug. So I believe you know that very well. For descriptive studies, correlational studies, there are times that we really need to establish relationships or association. So kagaya nung last study, we have this study about medical fake news and fear mongering during pandemic, the influence in vaccine confidence among millennials. So sa title pa lang daan, makita na nato na we really have to have a question about the significant relationship. Kailangan natin ma-determine ang significant relationship between the medical fake news and fear mongering during pandemic and relationship niya doon sa vaccine confidence. So that is just an example of a descriptive correlational na study na kailangan ng question about significant relationship. Do you have questions about the SOP? Or you would like to clarify something about the SOP? How are we going to do that? Anyway, you will have your advisor. No, you will be working with your advisor during sa time nga mag-conduct na mo og thesis ninyo. So you can ask advice sa ilaha kung paano ninyo himuon ang inyuhang papel. So ana lang. Or you can ask somebody na kanang researcher na, kasi kapag ka researcher na murag dali lang na sa ilaha nga maghimo og research. Magpaspas kay sila makabuhat og research pag researcher na. Pwede mo mag-ask sa ilaha og help. Now, we have also assumptions, but actually assumptions are just beliefs of the researchers, and most of the time we don't include this one in the paper anymore. Again, we don't include the assumptions anymore kasi unlike the hypothesis, assumptions are beliefs pero hindi na kailangan i-test. Yun lang. We just have to know that assumptions are just beliefs of the researcher pero it need not to be tested. Hindi na siya kailangan i-state sa research proposal. So ano bang example nito? Example, hospital pharmacist ka and you are designing a, what do you call that? A system. Gusto mo mag-propose ng system, automation na system sa hospital na yun yung gusto mo i-conduct na research. So meron ka mga assumption like number 1, pag mahumanin mo imuhang proposed system, the hospital will really use that system. So, that's an assumption. That's your belief. Pag mahumanin mo ni imuhang research, gamito ni nila. Pero it need not to be tested. And then at the same time, you have this assumption na that is your target hospital and you are assuming that hindi sila automated. Mano-mano sila. Dispensing, mano-mano, lahat documentation, they are manually doing it. So you are assuming that they need to have a system for automation. So yun yung examples ng assumption. Pero again, we don't really place that one, write that one in the research proposal anymore and hindi na siya tinitest. Kung ang napili nyo na na research is quantitative, meron talaga tayong hypothesis. And ito yung tinitest natin. Again, ito yung tinitest natin, the hypothesis. This is the educated guess. Educated siya kasi it's a product of readings from related literatures and studies. And this is our actually a tentative proposal or the tentative solution to our problem at hand. Now, since this is just a proposal, a tentative solution, then we need to test it. So do not forget, kailangan talaga siya, especially for quantitative research, we need to have a hypothesis. So example, you are conducting a study about a certain plant. So your hypothesis will be kung alternative hypothesis siya na yung plant mo is a potential like antihypertensive agent. So imuhang hypothesis is your plant is what do you call that, effective in lowering the blood, what do you call that, blood glucose level or blood pressure of your animals. Syempre animals kasi we are not yet allowed to do clinical trials. Ayan, so we have two types of hypothesis. I am also assuming that you know this very well, the null and the research or alternative hypothesis. Pag null, syempre this is denying the existence of the relationship or difference between your variables, and thus this is stated in the negative form. So just like this one, there is no significant difference between the efficiency of male and female radiologic technologists in the hospital laboratory. So this is just an example. Our hypothesis is that hindi naman nagkakaiba yung efficiency ng pag-work ng babae and lalaki na radiologic technologist in the laboratory, hospital laboratories. So, null hypothesis, we are denying the difference between the variables. And then, pag alternative hypothesis, that is just the complete opposite of the null. So, we will be stating it in the positive form. So, tanggalin lang natin yung no. Pero, kung kayo na ang gagawa ng inyong papel, ano bang ginagamit natin sa UIC most of the time? And actually, most of the papers na nababasa ko, the hypothesis is always stated in the null form. So, null hypothesis yan talaga siya, mostly. Okay? And at the end, sa conclusion, we will be either accepting or rejecting our null hypothesis. Depende sa result ng ating study. So, ayan, tatlong parts na yon ng research proposal, the introduction, the statement of the problem, and the hypothesis. Take note, sa qualitative na study, we don't need to have hypothesis also. Walang hypothesis testing for the qualitative na research. Okay? And then we have significance of the study. Syempre, we conduct study in order for us to contribute something to an organization or to the community as a whole or to the specific persons kung asa na to intention para asa ang atuang study. So sa significance of the study, what are we going to do is just to identify the people or the group of people, an organization na magkakaroon ng benefit, direct man or indirect, sa results ng inyong study. So ito yung question na kailangan nating tandaan. Who do you think will benefit from the result of the study? And what particular benefits for particular beneficiaries could be derived from the study? And how do we write that in our research proposal? I have an example here, significance of the study. This is still actually from my own research about the development of the pharmacology manual. So I have identified the following people or group of people na magbe-benefit sa manual na gagawin ko. So, syempre, I have there the pharmacy students, the faculty, the researcher, the higher education institutions, and so on. So, aside from identifying them, you have to explain also what benefit are they going to get from the result of your study. So, medyo mahaba-haba and we are doing this individually pero kaya lang naman. Dili naman parehas ang research karon class sa research sa una. So, ang research sa una pabagaay tanin niyo og research pag human sa hardbound baga kay hardbound. Actually nowadays hindi naman na ganon. Actually napansin ko paano na siya panipisay og research output. Dili na kaayo siya wordy nga mo lampas gyud siya pila ka pages. Well, except for the qualitative research. Again, I'm talking about the qualitative research. Since gathers data using interview, medyo baga-baga gyud. Ang last na qualitative research nga nakita nako moabot siya og 400 to 500 pages, and that is because of the transcription of the interview kasi you really have diba to transcribe the answers of your participants verbatim, so apil ilang mga katawa and so on, and then there will be times that you need to translate pa to English, especially if they're using their vernacular language, and then after that kailangan pa nimo siya hatagan og meanings. Ang katong mga linya nila dito nga gipang-ingon, hatagan pa nato meaning, and then after giving it meanings, kailangan pa nato sila i-cluster kasi magkapare-pareho sila ng sinabi, pagkapare-parehas ng meaning, so mag-determine tayo ng themes. So medyo mahaba ang qualitative na research. So nag-expect tayo na medyo makapal din ang quali. Pero sa quanti, most of the time, 100-page study, murag ingana lang siya taman. Kung mulampas man siya 100, dili po siya muabot og 200. So mulampas ra siya gamay. So mao na siya. Ang kaibahan lang yun nila, actually for me this is my own opinion, mas dalian ko mag-conduct og quantity na study, especially magsulat sa papel. But the problem is, number one, ang cost. Medyo mas mahal-mahal, especially if experimental na research. And at the same time, ang pagtrabaho sa laboratory. Katulang kapoy. And again, ang budget. Pero ang papel, I have no problem with the paper. Sa quali kasi, dili kayo siya mahal. You will just interview your participants. Maghatag lang kag token sa ilaha. Pero ang kakapoy ang kakapoy sa pagsulat ang dili nako kaya sa daghan kay kag sulaton pag quali na research. So pwede na ninyo siya isipon karon kay I think next sem most of you human na sa inyuhang ACADS. So definitely next year you will be starting your thesis writing. So isip-isipon na ninyo siya if you are going to make a quanti or a quali research. Kung mag-decide mo quanti, unsa na quanti, descriptive or experimental. Well, kung wala na pandemic by that time, you will be allowed to do an experimental research. And then the next part will be the theoretical framework. For quali research, again, for qualitative research, we don't need a theoretical framework anymore. But for quantitative research, most of the time, hinahanap talaga ito. So, pag theoretical framework, you need to look for theories or laws where you are going to anchor your study. So this will draw up the rationale of the research problem. This will become basis. The theory will become the basis of the research of objectives and even the scope. So pwede siyang theory, educational theory, scientific theory, or most of the time it's more on psychological na mga theory. Yun yung ginagawa or ini-include in the theoretical framework. Okay? So, wait lang. Nadiritso day siya. So, ano ba yung kailangan nyong ma-obtain when you are doing a theoretical framework? Siyempre, you need the name or the author of that theory, including the place and the year kung kailan niya ginawa or pinostulate yung theory na yan or yung principle na yan. And then, you also need to include the part of the theory that is applicable or significant to your current study at hand. And lastly, you need to have a synthesis by relating the theory to your findings. So, i-relate nyo siya doon sa research ninyo. Ito, this is just an example, pero putol-pud ni siya. This is still doon sa example ko na developing a pharmacology laboratory manual. So, ang theory na ginawa ko dito, ay nakinuha ko dito is the theory of constructivism, stating that how people learn is based on observation and scientific study. So, bakit ito yung in-include ko? Kasi di ba my goal is to make a laboratory manual. Kasi we believe na aside from the lecture, other learning strategies, it is also important to do hands-on activity in the laboratory. And the theory of constructivism includes learning through observation and like scientific studies, which is ginagawa talaga natin sa pharmacology. So yun lang ang ilagay nyo sa theoretical framework, the name of the theory, the author, and the part of the theory that is relevant or significant to your current study at hand. Okay? You can ask question if you are confused about something. Now, the last part here, other parts of the introduction is to be what you call that, discussed sa sunod na meeting na lang. Pero next meeting will be the midterm exam na. So that will be after the midterm exam na lang. Other parts of the introduction. So the next part will be the scope and the limitations of the study. This is where we set the parameters of our study. So we need to set boundaries or coverage kung hanggang saan lang ang area ng study natin, the issues, and sino lang yung mga respondents natin. And we also place here the period of the study, kailan mo gagawin ang study mo, and kailan yung projected na matatapos mo yung iyong study. And we can also include other limitations or constraints sa study natin. So ito yung mga i-include natin, class, when you're doing your scope and delimitations. Ito inuulit-ulit talaga ito sa study. Nilalagay natin ito sa introduction. Meron din tayo nito sa first part ng statement of the problem. And then sa scope and delimitation, uulitin na naman natin ang brief statement of the general purpose of the study or our objectives, and then the subject matter and topics studied and discussed, and then we may also include the local of the study. So where are we going to do the study? Sa Davao, sa Jensen, or anywhere asa ka mag-conduct sa imuhang study, and then the population from which the respondents were selected. So meron ka bang specific lang, like yung sinabi ko kanina na study, fear mongering and medical fake news and fear-mongering during pandemic, the influence on vaccine confidence among millennials. So they have this criteria na ang respondents lang nila, mga millennials. So you have to describe that one, the scope and the limitations. Sino ba yung mga millennials? And then lastly, the period of the study, meaning the time kung kailan mo ika-conduct. So this is just an example. This is still on the pharmacology laboratory manual development. So meron ako dyang objective of the study, what else? The subject matter and the topic at hand. And then I have here the respondents and the local. And lastly, I have there sa last the period kung kailan ko ikakandak ang study. So this study was just last year. O nga hangtod ron, wala pa ko naman sa manual. The study is already done, but the manual is not yet done. So take note, the limitations aim to narrow the scope of the study, but if you are going to make limitations, kung ang ibutang lang nimo kay limitations, ang isulat nato din ha is the potential weaknesses of the study. Ang delimitations, katulang parameter, boundaries, maulang ni akong studyhan. Kani siya, wala ni siya labot. Pero pag limitations, kung ang imuhang ibutang limitations, dili scope and delimitations, then ang imuhang isulat ana nga part, itong mga potential weaknesses sa imuhang study. Parehas atong ako ang MSPharm, masters na ako na study, ang limitation dito is that I don't have a positive control. So, di ba, ang ako ang study is about anti-angiogenic activity of the plant. Now, since I cannot access current or kanang existing na anti-angiogenic agent na approved yun as anti-angiogenic, nahimo to siya weakness sa ako ang study. Kasi you cannot call an experimental study a true experimental without the positive control. So, mo lang na siya ang example. So, dinha lang tataman for today. Do you have questions? Yes, Sir Gian, are you raising your hand?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, questions sa scope and limitation. Since COVID, tapos most probably closed ang labs, is it to be included sa scope and limitation?
Actually, depende sa study ninyo. As far as I know, nowadays, they don't approve experimental studies. So, naka either descriptive, quanti-descriptive or mixed method or naka-quali na mga research ngayon. So, hindi na natin siya kailangan ilagay sa scope and the limitations na you are conducting this study because the laboratories are closed due to pandemic. No need to state that really in the scope and the limitation.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, anything else that you want to clarify? Yes, Ma'am Christine.
Ma'am, yung last time pa rin po sa symposium namin is Mona kasi yan siya, ma'am, bigay ng
sige.
Tapos, sabi niya po dun sa framework is, yung nakasanayan kasi namin sa UIC na undergrad, ma'am, diba, is that
Sorry.
pwede siya sa theoretical na more than one theory yung ilalagay namin. Pero parang sabi niya ngayon, it's better do daw na isa lang daw, parang pipili ka lang ng isang theory that best describes or parang magamit mo talaga dun sa study. Tapos the rest of the theories is ilagay na lang sa RRL.
Okay. Sige. Actually, nowadays, yun na yung nagiging trend na isang theory na lang yung nilalagay natin sa theoretical framework and then ini-expound natin siya and nire-relate sa current study. And tama din yung sinabi sa symposium na if ever meron ka pang nakitang theory na might be relevant sa study mo, lagay mo na lang siya sa RRL. Yun na yung trend nowadays. Pero actually, it's still accepted. Accepted pa rin naman yung maraming theory sa theoretical framework. I have seen current studies na pagbasa ako sa theoretical framework, taasan yung idaghan ka yung theory nga gina-include. Pero it's still accepted. So it's up to you as the researcher whether you will be concentrating to one theory only or isulat nimo tanan. Decision gihapon sa sa researcher. Pero pag abot sa sa defense, sa proposal defense for example, mag-suggest gihapon ang inyong mga panel. There are panelists na okay lang sa kanila ang one theory. Meron ding panelist na gusto nila isang okay lang sa kanila maraming theory. Meron ding panelist na gusto nila isang theory lang, so pinapalipat yung ibang theories sa RL. So, pwede nyo ding sundin ang recommendation ng inyong panel. Pero kung wala pa'y proposal defense ka ng kamo pa, nagbuhat pa mo sarili ninyong papel, you assess your study if kailangan yun ba daghanon ang theory or dili. Okay? Sa part man pud sa experimental na study, experimental research, most of the time we don't really have theories, no? Especially if we are conducting experiments about plants for a certain pharmacological application. Most of the time we cannot see theories there na parehas sa mga theories sa psychology or sa education. Unsa ba ang ito ang ginabutang? Most of the time we place their literatures about the traditional use of the plant for some places, like mga places na ginagamit ni siya nga plant for this specific pharmacological action. And then butangan pud nato siya, aside from the traditional use, ginabutang pud nato ang existing literatures and studies about the phytochemicals present in the plant. Tapos ginapangitaan nato siya related literature about the kanang pharmacological use of that phytochemical that might be responsible sa pharmacologic action na ato ang ginastadihan. So kana nga case, medyo daghan-daghan ang ato ang ginabutang. We might not call it a theory, but pwede na nato siya tawagon as like that. And medyo daghan, traditional use, phytochem, use sa, pharmacological activity sa phytochem, pwede po nato siya himuon for experimental na study. Okay? Okay, anything else? Naa pa ba mo'y gusto ipangutana? Excited na ba ta magbuhat o research? Honestly speaking, when I was taking my masters, I was not really excited to make a research because I was thinking about the budget, and then those days we are not allowed to make we are compelled to make an experimental one. So, murag budget gid akong problema atong mga panahon na mo na nga dili ko excited. Pero since pandemic man karon, I think you will not be allowed to do an experimental research. The laboratories are closed. The school is most likely closed, so you cannot conduct your experiment there. Okay? Pero kato mga first year pa lang, I think na yung mga first year pa lang dire. Take your time. Pero pwede na mo mag-start og isip-isip kung sa ba mga research problem inyong himuon. So I'll let you watch a video here. This will be connected to our activity. Wait lang, let me open it.